So here we have a recovery tank. It's hooked up to the out port on the back here. We've got the inline is hooked up to the regulator, and then we've got that hooked up to the compressor for low side port. This is where we're going to be vacuuming from. On the JDF, this is the low side port here that we're looking at. Sorry for the camera stuff. I'm trying to do this all one-handed here. Yeah, as you can see, wiggling that around just really ensures that you've got it punctured. Sometimes it bends the copper and doesn't quite get in. Anyhow, got the valve was a little stuck on here. Yeah, see right here, you can see I was wiggling it some more. I wasn't getting all the pressure come through. So a little bit of a wiggle, it popped through the line. Anyhow, you can see here we're definitely getting pressure through. I keep all the valves off except for the one on the pliers there. That way it actually just shows the pressure. Make sure your bottle's opened up. I had already opened it before starting the video here. Make sure you tear your scale to 0. Flip these valves on here. Pop that bad boy on. Then open the valves. I always start at the tank and open my valves towards the machine. Just that way there's good suction to the lines prior to opening those other valves. Now basically it's just kind of a waiting game to see how much comes out. So we're about 15-20 minutes in, and as you can see here, we've got negative suction here. That's good. We want negative pressure. We've pulled out about 6.5 ounces, which for these older units, usually they have a leak somewhere. So yeah, 6.5 is common what I see doing these. Make sure you shut off your valve prior to shutting everything else off. I pop these off, and you can see here I'm tapping my finger on there. I usually go feel through and try to see if there's any suction on that. Yeah, then you just go ahead and shut shut all the valves off, shut everything off. Got a little crazy with the video taking. It was kind of a pain. I should have had somebody else film the whole thing while I did this, but make sure you document how much you pulled out. It's always got to keep track of all that stuff. Alright, so now that we've got it back down, we're going to start cutting out these lines. We're also going to be cutting out on this unit, we're taking out the whole filter dryer assembly and the compressor. So I already pulled these nuts off. This is where the camera starts to get even more funky. Sorry guys. Tried setting it down just so I can take care of some stuff here. Make sure you guys get your flame adjusted good. If you get too high with it, it'll cut through your lines and blow holes through. If you get too low, it just takes 10 years to heat everything up. So I personally tend to start on this particular solder area. I don't know. To me, it just feels easier when I'm pulling that apart there, and then I can just pick up on the whole system to pull it out. This thing usually takes a while to heat up because that filter dryer is pretty thick there. I tend to hold this, as you can see with the torch, kind of at an upward angle, and I keep the heat down on the thicker area. That way by the time it heats that up, it helps transfer the heat up pretty well. So You just really got to focus a lot of heat on that thing. Sorry about that. Yeah, tried getting a better angle on the camera here. I got it propped up for this because I definitely realized that I was going to need some pliers. I highly recommend that nobody tries filming this process. Here, I'm going to call my coworker over real quick. We'll see if he can come grab my phone real quick. Yeah, see this here, that's what I was talking about, grabbing the whole assembly. It's a little easier once you can grab it there. Sorry, my coworker doesn't know how to work a camera. My apologies. We started all over here. Gotta reheat this. Darn coworkers. I turned up the torch a little bit. Again, this is a thick area, so trying to get the right amount of heat, it takes a little extra. Even when you go to solder this in, it tends to take a little bit more heat. You just really got to make sure that you're cautious and focusing your heat in the right spots. Yeah, see right here, this is exactly why you got to be careful, because I got too much heat on that thinner line and it popped through. Now that flame coming out of there was just because this assembly went bad and the seal inside the compressor went bad and was pumping oil through the system. And so that whole filter dryer there is full of oil. Now I'm just going to go through and remove these two lines off the side of the compressor. And again, this is another time where I just was emphasizing on really keeping heat focused on the thicker pipe out of the two there. See, that line broke as well. Some of these older lines are just a pain. But this right here, that's full of hot oil, so be careful with that. Now we can dive in and hit some of these other joints here. And this is another spot where I try to keep the heat like facing in an upward angle. And I keep the torch moving around quite a bit, so I'm not overheating just one spot. That way it kind of disperses the heat. And see, I start here with this thicker tube on the right. Usually once that's free, it makes it pretty easy to get that thin one out. Just make sure you keep the torch kind of moving around, especially if you've got her turned up high. See, and here the cap tube decided to snap, just like every other friggin' thing on this. If you get that just right, you can slide the cap tube out pretty easy. It's just getting it to that point without melting that cap tube in half, because when those snap, it's kind of a pain in the butt. Yeah, see, she's on the verge of snapping at that point. I mean, the cap tube was getting a little too hot, but she finally gave way. Perfect. Go ahead and shut your torch off. At this point, you can kind of clean things up. So I've set everything in place here with all the newer stuff. I prefer to kind of mock things up. I get the whole new filter dryer assembly, the tubing, everything. I kind of get everything set in where it needs to be before I start soldering. That way, once I start soldering, I'm kind of just going to town. I've already soldered that whole setup here prior to filming. I totally spaced it. But yeah, so I added that high side port. That's always important. It helps with diagnosis. Again, this is another spot where you really got to be careful. That capillary tube right there, if you heat that up, it'll just collapse or it'll break in half. So again, this is another, I'm just focusing a lot of my heat on the thicker metals, and then you can kind of just run it up and just throw a dab of solder on it. It's usually pretty good. Make sure you don't miss any of the spots in the back around where the cap tube's at. There's a little crack there in the pipe that tends to get missed a lot. See, I was fighting with it here. It just wasn't wanting to seal up. And you can tell here just by looking at that. I mean, I was using a lot of heat. I probably did not need nearly as much torch on that. But I made it work. So I'm getting ready to solder those two joints, and then that pipe that I got just laying on the compressor, I had to get set into place. So, but this is the end result. Everything should be soldered up like that. I kind of skipped, the video of me soldering that in, but at this point I've got it now under a deep cycle vac after letting all the pipes cool down. We're looking at trying to get her down to 400 microns, and I just kicked it on, so it was taking a while. But once you get her down to 400 microns, then you just start filling her up. The Jdf4 takes 10 ounces. Yeah. So good luck.